The U.S. Department of Energy is cleaning up the Oak Ridge Reservation of residual hazardous and radioactive contamination left over as a result of decades of nuclear energy research. Much of that work has been influenced by the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup operations. You're welcome to attend the meetings and be part of this important work.
First meeting, it's looking good. Everybody, glad to have everyone here, everybody online. Hope everybody dried out a little today. Let's start with comment from the federal and state agency representatives.
Oh, excellent. Want to be clear, isn't it?
Yay, man, let's hear.
They just jump in front of her.
You're up.
Good evening, everyone, and hey, thanks for being here. I know there's a lot going on as we get closer to summer. I know we're busier and busier with our families and our lives and our work and things like that. But I just want to start off by saying, appreciate everyone joining us tonight. I think it's going to be a great discussion with Karen on the budget. Two quick updates on cleanup. Last week, as we started the demolition of the final hot cells at Building 3026 at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I don't know if many of you or all of you have been on the tour or will be going on a tour. You can't miss it. This facility is right in basically the heart of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. You won't actually see the hot cells. What you'll see is about a 6-story white tent where we're actually doing the work. So if you've been out there and you've seen a really large tent, that's where we're doing the work. We've started that demolition, and there'll be another phase of demolition that we'll do in the fall. But this is really important risk reduction that we're doing at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. It's a piece of work that we've been working toward for some time. So it's really exciting to get to that work. Second thing I'll mention is Y12. Alpha 2 facility. We are doing demolition at Alpha 2. This is the first large structure, largest demolition that we're doing today at Y12. And it's also the first former uranium enrichment facility at Y12 that we're doing. We've got the yellow iron on that building, which I think is always the exciting part of it. I like the deactivation work when we take a lot of the risk and material out of the buildings, but nothing's more exciting than seeing big pieces of equipment tearing away at buildings. And that's what's happening at Alpha 2 at Y12. So if you all have the chance to get out there, hopefully in the near future, that demolition is going to be going on for some time and you'll actually be able to see that work in progress. That's it for me.
Thank you. Sure.
I have nothing to add.
Christoph?
Good evening, glad to be here. I do not have any comments.
Don't believe we've got anyone else online. Thank you. All right. Ms. McCurdy, if you'll read the bio, we're going to get a presentation from Ms. Thompson.
Karen Thompson serves as the acting director of the Planning and Execution Division of the Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management. She oversees the planning and execution of cleanup at Oak Ridge's 3 primary sites, ETTP, Y12, and ORNL. Her oversight also includes strategic planning, life cycle baseline development and configuration control, budget development, funds management, contractor earned value management system validation, real and personal property, pardon me, and integration, analysis, and reporting of contractor cost and schedule performance. Karen has spent the last 24 years with DOE in Oak Ridge. Before becoming the acting director, she was the planning and baseline management branch chief, where she was responsible for managing the day-to-day activities for property, budget formulation, baseline and planning, and project controls. Welcome.
You have the floor, Ms. Thompson.
All right. Thank you guys for having me today.
Real quick, does everybody have this on the back, from the back of their packet?
Yes.
Some of we found them back of it.
You mean with the micro print? No, it's really small. She's gonna
That's
take
how-
it out electronically. You got it.
There's some of us think you do this on purpose. And I have a 32-inch monitor that I built it also. We'll probably explain part of it, but, what this is.
Yeah.
What this is, last year when I was here, you guys asked me to take the recommendations that you give each year and basically compare it to the activities that we did here. And so that's what this is. I put that spreadsheet together to show you that. I think that was what you guys were asking for. Is that correct? Takes your recommendation, compares it to what budget numbers that I can give you.
Yeah. Right.
And then what we did with that budget, what activities we performed in each of the PBSs. So, so that is for you to take and look at. I'm going to go through quite a bit of what's in there on the screen. So, good. So,
I'll make it work already.
it appears that I have. It's okay. I don't know why. Okay, so the first, so now it's gonna work. A really general overview of the federal budget process. So at any given point in time, we have multiple budgets going on. We have the execution year budget for us, which is FY 25. We have the budget that is going through, getting ready to go to Congress, which is 26. That's the one that the skinny budget came out from the president's office last week. And then we're starting the 27 formulation process. That's where your recommendations come in for 27. So this kind of describes the actual process that takes place. The first thing that happens is field offices develop their budgets. They're given a target, an overall amount. Each agency is given an overall amount to plan to. And then each field office organization is a program office, and then field office is given a target to plan to. This is what you assume, and this is the amount to plan to. And then they develop a budget that fits your priorities. And then you send it up to the headquarters program office. They consolidate all those. Those go to the secretary's office. The secretaries of each cabinet agency sends all of that in together, and OMB consolidates the department's budgets. Once that happens, there's a process where that's called pass back, and that's where OMB marks up to meet the administration's priorities and sends those budgets back. And sites get the opportunity, organizations get the opportunity to do an appeal. And that appeal would be like, if you can't meet your requirements, and then that goes back to OMB. From that, that's where the budget goes to the president. And when the president approves the budget, it goes to Congress. Once it goes to Congress, it goes to the subcommittees in the House and the Senate, and they develop a bill. And basically, they go through a process called conferencing, where they go back and forth until they reach agreement. And once that's done, then that's the bill that's voted on. Once that's all approved, that's the part that takes a really long time, that back and forth. And then that goes to the president, and he signs it into law. So that's basically the way the process works at a really high level. We fit in on, you see the seals that on this side, we're a little bit before those seals in the process. So that's how I would describe it. So off the left side. Yes, just a little bit before those seals. But in order to develop a budget, you start a long time before that. You have a plan, right? And we have a life cycle plan that takes all of our work. It's comprised of scope, schedule, and cost, and risks. And we basically build a plan for everything that we have to do to meet all of our requirements, and for the entirety of our program. And that's the starting point for us building a budget. We take that, we look at that, and we say, okay, what's changed since we did this? Have we awarded a contract? Is the contractor's technical approach different? Do we need to account for that? Those kind of things. You know, is there an emerging requirement? Has something new happened that we need to enter into the cycle? Is there new work that's come about? Or do we have different regulatory approaches? Any of that happens, we try to adjust our plan for that. And then we look at our work in 4 categories. We look, the first thing we fund is what makes us safe and compliant in all of our operations. Safety is the number one thing that we fund first off the top. And then we look at all of our regulatory commitments and we fund those next. And then we look at, okay, is there something that has to be done to enable us to continue our work, like the construction of the on-site circular cell and outfall 200. You know, those are things that we have to have in place to do our work. So we look at those priorities, and then we look at continuing the ongoing cleanup operations that we have. So that's the order that we look at that. We take the work that we have, it's all priced and it's spread over a schedule. And then we take that work and we look at what can we get done with the dollars that we have available, given those priorities. And once we do that, then we balance that to what we have. And then we get our impacts by comparing what our requirements are to what we have funding for. And then we basically resequence anything and push it out to the next available window if we don't have adequate funding. So that's basically the process. So our priorities in OREM haven't changed in a very long time. They're to close ETTP and enable reindustrialization whenever we can. We also are focused on demolishing excess contaminated facilities at the Oak Ridge National Lab in Y12. And then, as I spoke before, the infrastructure that we're working on right now is to enable the mercury treatment facility and the circular waste disposal. We need both of those things to support our cleanup. And then we continue to disposition the uranium-233 material. And we also operate the transuranic waste processing center. And we also have in our plan for the debris and the sludges out in the future. And then we, of course, the number one priority is always maintain our facilities safe and compliant. So I know this is really hard to read, and the only budget numbers that I have for you are the 24 numbers. And the reason for that is that the 25 budget volumes with the details have not been released. And so what I did here was basically I was going to give you an idea what we got in 24. And walk you through what each of our PBSs are. And I think there's some new folks here, so I'm going to explain real fast about what a PBS is. So our funding comes in something called project baseline summaries. In the budget, you'll see it. It'll have a 2-letter designation. OR is ours, and then it'll have a series of numbers after it. What that is like a checking account designation. It's the best way I can describe it. Is if you get an appropriation in one of those buckets, you can't write a check from a different one of those buckets. Does that make sense? So basically, and I apologize if you guys already know this. I just always want to try to cover this. So we have here multiple appropriations, and we also we have multiple PBSs, but we also have a defense appropriation and the uranium enrichment D&D fund. The only other place in the country that is allowed to use the uranium enrichment D&D fund, besides the East Tennessee Technology Park, is Portsmouth and Paducah. And it's set aside for those facilities. And we, as you know, we're getting close to the end of the UED&D funding here in Oak Ridge. But that is not, we call that's PBS 40. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. Most of our work is defense funded. If you look at this chart, there's a legend at the bottom, but the orange is defense and the green is UED&D funds. So you'll have that to take with you. You can look at that. And I apologize, there's not a legend at the bottom. I didn't put it on there. So
Orange with defense and
the defense is the orange and the green is the UED&D fund. There's only two accounts, 40 and 102, which is the post-retirement life and medical, where the pensions are, is the only other fund. PBS 11D is the U233 processing. Our budget in 24 was $55 million for that. And that's actually where we downland, process, and ship U233 at ORNL. PBS 13B is solid waste stabilization and disposition. Our budget last year was $72 million. And in that PBS, we process contact handled, remote handled transuranics. It's also where we have where we're trying to get a plan for processing dioxin and furans and sodium shields. And we're actually working on doing that. That's part of what's in our budget, things that were previously no path to disposal waste. So that's also in that PBS. And then PBS 20, safeguards and security. That's cybersecurity, guards and guns, all that. And that runs about $1 million a year. We have the UED&D fund. That is where all of the cleanup work at East Tennessee Technology Park has been done. But right now we're working on groundwater and remaining media at ETTP. And that was $91 million in 24. And then the next two items on the screen, that they're have a little bit different number. Those are construction line items. And the distinction for a construction line item is that is something that requires additional approvals. It is very rigidly followed. There's a lot of rules to get that kind of funding. You can only use, there's gates basically for each phase of that. And in the back of the budget volumes, when they're released, there is something called a project data sheet for each of those. And so you can look and see the entire plan. It talks about the history of the project and all that. That's available in the budget if you go out to OMB's websites. And you should be able to look at the 24 budget that's out there and see the data sheets for these two projects. And when the new one's released, you'll be able to do that. But you'll see 14D403 and 17D401. So the first number is the year that the project started. The D is defense. That's the appropriation. And then the number at the end is just a sequential number assigned to those types of projects. And that's where you would see the Outfall 200 project and the EMDF. In the budget, it's called OSWDF, On-Site Waste Disposal Facility. And so, but we call it is EMDF. It's the same thing. So for Outfall, we got $30 million in 24, and we continued construction at the water treatment facility. And then for the on-site waste disposal facility in 24, we got $35 million. And we continued, the construction there. We finished, the early site prep and, groundwater field demonstration, activities are well underway, pretty nearing the end. And then, the next, PBS you see 41, and 42, that those two are where the bulk of our cleanup work is. The D&D work and a lot of soil remediation that's planned in the future at ORNL and Y12. 41 is Y12 and 42 is ORNL. And right now, the projects that Eric talked about, Alpha 2 is being funded out of 41. And then there's deactivation going on in several of the buildings out there, the big process buildings where we've got there's quite a bit of the bulk of the cleanup work happens in the deactivation process. The pretty stuff happens in the demolition, but there's a whole lot of money goes into the deactivation process. And the same thing at in PBS 42 at ORNL. Basically, oh, and surveillance and maintenance is also for Y12 and ORNL funded on those accounts. And then at Y12, the landfill and EMWMF operations is also paid for out of 41. And 42, that's where our liquid gases and process waste operations systems funded. It also funds a lot of the cleanup work that we're doing in Central Campus, out in the isotope area facilities. That's where that work is funded. And in 41, we got right at $162 million. And in 42, we got $202 million. Congress has been very generous with us in those accounts in the last couple of years. We're really thankful for that. And then in PBS 100, which is community and regulatory support, that's where this board is funded out of. And also where TDEC and TEMA grants are funded from. And we had $5.5 million for that in 24. PBS 102, which is post-retirement life and medical. It actually funds the benefits for grandfathered employees in the pension fund. And it got $24.7 million in 24. And then in the last one is technology development, TD 100. And basically, that's funding activities to help us better deal with mercury, technology activities to help us better deal with mercury that we find in the cleanup process. So that's pretty much what happened in 24. That is all of the numbers that I have for you today. But whenever everything's released, then we can send out some stuff like I did. I think I did. We were in this same position last year. I think you guys the budget
We're further along.
yeah, I think so. But we just haven't been able to get the volumes to release. So when that comes out, I'll send the link to Shelley and she can send it out to you guys. So the next slide, that's even hard. That was hard to read, but basically it talks about the continued, we still have all the same accounts as we did in 24. We have those same accounts for the budgets in 25. So we're going to continue U-233 downblending operations. We're going to continue processing transuranics. And then we actually are planning on to place the liquid phase of dioxin and purines under contract. And I did based on what we hope is an identified treatment pathway. So we're working to do that. Those were previously no pathways. So that is that's a good thing. In PBS 20, that's the safeguards and security. We fund that. That's every year's thing that we fund. So we continue to fund the same activities. PBS 40, we're going to continue groundwater and remaining media activities at ECTP. And then we are working on closure activities, shoreline cleanup, that kind of stuff, getting things ready so that we can make an exit from ECTP. And then we are transferring acreage that's available for reuse. That's part of what happens in PBS 40 to non-federal ownership, and that reduces the department's liability and the government's liability long term. And then for outfall, we've made some progress on the construction activities at the mercury treatment facility. We are still working on replanning that to get it to the best stage that we can, so that we'll have a good solid plan going forward on that. For the on-site waste disposal facilities, we're continuing construction activities. And we're finishing up the groundwater field demo, and we're starting the monitoring phase for that this year. And then for PBS 41, which is where the Y12 cleanup, of course, we're operating the landfills, EMWMF, continuous surveillance and maintenance, but we're also working in high-risk facilities, including the demo of Alpha 2, pre-demo activities in Beta 4, Alpha 4, and Beta 1. And then, I need to click this. Okay, so, and then going on to PBS 42, now that one you can see probably, that's where the LGWO is operated out of. We'll continue to do that. That's every year we pay for that. Out of this account, we also pay for the surveillance and maintenance of the EM facilities. We are continuing high risk, excess properties, including Bethel Valley Isotopes facilities, the 3026 hot cells that Eric talked about, 3042 graphite reactor support facilities, 3517, 3544 complex, and 5505. So we got a lot of work going on. I know we got $202 million in 24, and we're just continuing on with the good work that's going on out there. And then in PBS 100, we just continue to fund our grants with the state for conducting oversight and to continue to fund the SSAB. And then, so in PBS 100, we continue to fund the pensions. And then in technology development, we have several activities supporting Mercury, some robotic testing, that kind of thing, that are ongoing. And so that's the planned activities for 25. So the next thing, so in March of this year, there was a year continuing resolution that was signed, and basically in a continuing resolution, there's some rules. You can't start certain new activities, and generally things are at the same level that they were in the previous year. But we don't have the breakouts by site. So to tell you what each of these PBSs look like this year, we don't have the information available to do that. And normally there's a volume that's released that's environmental management. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but whenever we get available information that is where I can send it out, I'll send it to Shelley and we'll follow up and let you guys know. And I think the last year it happened between when I did my presentation and when is it the executive committee that meets in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
And between those two things, when we got it last year, so maybe in a couple, yeah, so maybe in a couple of weeks we'll have that. And then the FY 26 president's budget came out on May the 2nd. It is very high level. You can go out there, you can just search for Department of Energy, pull it up. It's at the program level. And you can see, but it's available out there. But this, what I actually want to be sure is that you guys have provided us with some really good recommendations in the past. And you've supported our work, and you've also given us some ideas of things to address, things that were important to you. And so this is also the time for you guys to do that. And I hope this information helps you to do that. And it's about this. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Wow.
Good presentation. A lot of information.
Probably the eye test.
Yeah. We will, ask if there's anyone online from the board that has comments.
Look to the board on the Zoom.
Any hands, anyone in the room? Comments, questions?
I'm new to this, so how are the contractors selected? Do they just have a set of contractors that they use for the cleanup?
So there's there's usually, and I'm not a contracting officer, so. But usually, it takes, for a contract, like a cleanup contract, takes several years. And there is a process where, there is a request for proposals that goes out, and it's open bid. And there's a lot of scope that's put out for people to know what they're bidding on. And then it usually takes, there's a evaluation board, there's criteria that's selected in advance, and so that's also included in our planning. Like when we know we're gonna change contractors, you'll see that in our budgeting, we'll account for that, because it's not that is a long process, and that's also included in our plan when we think we're gonna need a contract. And
Because like, they don't go with like the cheapest contractor or whatever. They're probably a monopoly, right? Like there's only 3 contractors that know how to do all the paper. Yeah. Does it good like that?
So there is a limited pool
Okay.
of companies that have the skill set to do the kind of work that we require. There is no single company that fulfills our requirements. And so what you see is companies such as Amentum, Jacobs Engineering, Fluor, Bechtel. What they do is they partner for each contract. One of the oddities is Bechtel and Amentum may partner together on one contract for, say, just Hanford, and then they'll have different relationships for the contract in Oak Ridge. But those partnerships then bid on the contract, and there is it is not a quick process. It takes anywhere from 1 year to 2 years just to write the RFP.
So ORNL and Y12, they don't have people that actually can help with these things, or?
Not ours. No, those are totally separate contracts that have different scope that require different
skill mix.
skill mixes. Yeah.
Do they have like if they go over so many days or a budget, does that affect their contract?
Yes.
Like,
They are graded on their
okay.
performance.
Yes.
If they get done early, it's good for them. If they get done late, it's bad for them.
Okay.
And there's just a very large process in place to evaluate that. And it ends up having a lot of conversations between DOE and the contractor about that.
Well, and just even getting the people that they need here, because I guess there's housing issues too. With bringing in different.
Those particular considerations lie entirely with the contractor. They are required to name there are on the contracts, there are what are called named positions.
Okay.
And I mean, it's not very many. It's usually maybe a dozen people who are specifically named as being on the contract. But beyond that, the rest of the workforce it's really up to the contractors to select them.
And to Roger's point, you'll hear the term means and methods. We try not to get into that with our contracts. That's telling them exactly how they should do their work. We try to tell them what the objectives are that they need to accomplish under the contract, and then we assign fee and other incentives to that to ensure that they complete that work. But as Roger pointed out, having the right kind of people, the right numbers of people, they are responsible for all that, and that actually becomes part of their performance as well.
It'd be a hard thing to think about, when you're planning something 2 years out. Okay.
Well, and imagine too, most of these large cleanup contracts span at least 10 years.
Yeah.
With extensions built in, so they could go up to 15 years. These are long contracts.
Our current contract with UCOR is an $8 billion contract. So these are fairly significant awards that they get. And some of you have heard, this contract that we're operating right now is a new mechanism compared to the way we have done things in the past. It's called in-state contracting. And it actually, to your point, it requires a lot more detail and scope for events that are going to happen 7, 8, 9 years down the road. And so in theory, it sounded awesome. The reality is that it's turning out to be a little more difficult to execute, but we're working through that. So,
Like, is there something in the budget for health things for people maybe in 20 years down the road that worked on these facilities that weren't necessarily OR&L or Y-12 employees, but were contractor employees? Is that?
that doesn't come out of our contract. You're talking about sick worker
Like any of that?
issues.
Okay.
I'm not sure where, that comes out of Department of Energy budget, but it doesn't come out of our.
It's the thoughts.
Those are funded in a different place.
Okay.
They are available to
And DOE workers.
Okay.
it's federal and contractor workers, but
I have a question. It was a great presentation. I thought very thorough and easy for me to understand.
Experience.
What hip waiters?
The only question is a comment really that we want to ensure that we get treated fairly in this process. And, and we have a new administration and they have different priorities. And I know you don't know what's going to happen in these areas. But what is your feeling about something we as an advisory board need to recommend in an area that you think might be vulnerable?
Yeah.
I think it would be fair. I think one thing that would be good is to first look at your budget recommendations for the last several years.
Yeah,
And then next to that, look at our budget over the last several years. And that'll give you an idea of, obviously, understand there are a lot of factors that go into our budget formulation and then how Congress treats us.
yeah.
But I would say if you looked at those previous recommendations, that should be a very good, given that our budgets have been going up.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good place to start.
Yeah. I know things are changing rapidly and I want us to be sure to put our best foot forward
Absolutely.
as a recommendation such that we don't get unfairly reduced in some areas.
I kind of had two parts I was gonna ask about. I'm sure I asked this last year. Funding is still probably the biggest roadblock, biggest stumbling. I mean, you guys, if you had more money, you could spend it, I'm sure. Is there a number, a figure, a percentage that you guys look at from last year, kind of to go along with Mr. Connor there? I mean, if you asked for an extra 300 million, would they laugh at you? Is there a kind of a, no, we need to stay in this parameter?
I think we could probably ask for whatever, but that doesn't mean we get it. But the thing I think that's advantage, that's helped us a lot is that we have a sound plan.
Yeah.
And so if something happens and we have to adjust, whether it's less money or more money, we have all of our ducks in a row to know how to answer those questions. And with that, I think you get a lot of confidence. That's what I've seen over time. The organizations that have a sound plan and a good performing contractor, we can adjust to changes and either pick up more work, or we can actually, if necessary, we can adjust for issues a lot easier than a site that doesn't have good sound planning. Does that answer your
Yes.
question?
How much more work could you plan? If we were to ask, how much more could you spend?
You,
Well, we can we can always spend it.
Yeah.
well, up to a point.
Resources become a problem.
Yeah.
Well,
How to, within the scope of our workforce.
Yeah.
We could, and maybe some moderate expansion of our workforce. We do get to a point where we can't hire enough people to get the work done.
yeah, that's.
And in this environment around Oak Ridge, with all the construction work going on at Y12, everything that's going on at Cornell, there's a lot of competition for trained workforce.
Yeah.
And so, I would love to say that if we got $1 billion, we're 700, somewhere around that. Yeah, getting an extra 300 million. Can we use that? Yeah, I don't know if we could actually get it used in a year though.
Yeah,
If you don't use it.
if you don't use it, you get.
You can, yeah.
Can, yeah.
So
Okay, well, that was my question. Coming from a contractor standpoint, sometimes at the end of the year, you could move things around a bit. I know these are all, their own accounts, but say you had a delay. And you say you had like, I don't know, $15 million. And your delay, you're waiting on that. And can you take that $15 million and roll it over into the next fiscal year?
What we have is called know your money. So we're not like some organizations where you have to spend it all in a year. We can carry that over.
Okay.
We can put it on our contract if we have an excess, like for a line item, maybe they funded a lot in 1 year and you don't need it till the next year, but you're getting ready to ramp up construction. We can do something called pre-fund or pre-positioning. So we put that, it's basically held until the next year and it comes back to us.
Okay.
But
Yes,
it
ma'am,
has
we
to
can.
be in the same.
It has to be the same
pot.
color money. That's
Right.
right. It has to be the same pot of money. Yes.
If I could add something to that though, Chris, I think you're on the right track, kind of two things to what you said. I find the budget process to be interestingly flexible as you go through the process, as you're working with OMB and then Congress. And what sometimes can happen, to your point, is we may be in a budget cycle and we may get questions like, hey, if you had an additional $30 million, what would you do with that? That's when it's really important from a priority perspective to understand, here's the core work we're really interested in, but if you got that extra money, here's where that investment should be. It's important to have that list because the sites that know what that buyback list looks like, right, are the ones that usually benefit from getting that additional funding.
Yeah, just kind of along the same point that Chris was making. Do we have an opportunity now with all the interest we're getting from the governor and everyone else on the nuclear renaissance here in Oak Ridge area with interested companies coming in? Can we augment one of the budgets for UCOR for site prep or shore cleanup or something to help that overall process for new companies to come in and occupy the space and take advantage of all the interest in the quote nuclear renaissance in this area. In other words, I'm saying, can we increase a budget for UCOR that would enable them to maybe do the reindustrialization or site prep or whatever to encourage that growth?
That would require a contract change, wouldn't it?
Theoretically, not theoretically, I'll say theoretically, yes, and here's why I say theoretically. That is in effect what UCOR is doing today, right? If you look at the work we've done at ETTP, cleanup occurred, right? That
Yeah.
land was then transferred to the community. The community has then transferred that land to those companies that you just talked about. So
Right.
that process is occurring. I guess the question is, do you want to see
more?
you want to see that pattern continue, but it's not always a matter of adding additional budget, because as Roger pointed out, and Karen as well, you can only do so much work in a given period of time in a given space. So it's just understanding how much you can do. But
I'm
so-
just saying, do we have an opportunity
No,
to
I
ask for more because of all the interest in that area?
The other thing to keep in mind too is, so we have completed almost all of our work in TTP. And we've actually transferred almost all the property out there.
Yeah.
So as we saw on the tour, most of our focus now, cleanup is at Y12 and Cornell. Those are not closure sites.
Yeah.
Both of those facilities will have ongoing mission for a very long time. The opportunity, and Y12 is the really good example, is their mission is rapidly changing and expanding. They need more real estate. And as you all saw, there's not a lot there. So it's not necessarily the renaissance that we're supporting, but our work will enable larger and more mission at Y12, which should have, for the community, should have basically the same effect as private companies coming into
Yeah.
ETTP.
Yeah.
So, yeah, more money. I don't think you're gonna find any of us say.
Why not ask for more?
You know,
I think you've made an excellent point, though. If you look at the memo that Secretary of Energy Chris Wright put out, right, he had his 9-point plan for what he wants the department to focus on. 3 of them: energy independence,
Yeah.
science, and defense.
Yeah.
All 3 of those at Oak Ridge. So if you wanted to say that you felt that Oak Ridge is aligned with those priorities, because I've certainly said that. So, I mean, it's something to think about, but I think you're on the right track.
Yeah. At least we could recommend it,
mhm.
certainly.
And we send those to the program office.
Yeah.
Mr. Tuck.
But you mentioned that the, some of the property had been transferred. Who is it transferred to?
I will say broadly the community, because there are a number of different entities in the community. The city of Oak Ridge has an industrial development board. There's a community reuse organization. There's a number of different organizations, but broadly they are the community.
And actually, I think we had actually in the past, sometimes the property comes straight from DOE, other times it goes through GSA. And if it goes through GSA, then you enter into a different group of, like, we can transfer it directly to the city, not just the IDB, but it can go to the city.
Right.
It's very dependent on what the property will be used for,
Who requested?
who requests it. You know, that's things like that.
Was, is the community that gets it today, is it the is it what substituted Crowit? Are you familiar with Crowett?
Oh, very familiar.
Okay, but I figured. So what, and it was my understanding their function was to take this excess land and market it.
Yes.
Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
Okay. But they no longer exist.
Actually, they do.
Okay, still do exist then.
But you're right, they have announced their intention to close their doors at some point.
Again,
Who-
yeah,
I guess.
that's fair to say.
What I'm trying to ferret out in my mind is it sounds like there's a goodly effort to prepare real property for brownfield use or for as best it may be utilized. And then it doesn't seem to be as concentrated or refined process of taking it from availability to marketing. And I'm trying to figure out if my thought process is correct in that. That's really what I'm trying to figure out.
Here's kind of my experience, and I've seen this at other sites because I worked up at Hanford and a whole bunch of other places where we've done very similar processes. If you want to use CROAT, which is a community reuse organization, Hanford has one, Savannah River has one. A lot of sites have those types of organizations. A CROAT, they'll work nationally with these companies that go scout sites for different industrial purposes. When I was up at Hanford, it was almost always agriculture or chicken for some reason. It was usually something because it's a very agricultural area. So a CROAT will work with those companies. They'll have their eye on a site, and it may have power, water, it just may be flat open land. It'll have something that makes that property appealing to them. Typically by time we get the request from a CROAT type organization, they already have an intended use for the land. It's a little bit different from what you described. It's not get the land and necessarily market it. They probably have a good idea of the interest in that property by the time they're asking us to transfer it.
Okay. So,
Mr. Tuck, we need to pause for just a moment. I've been informed that we need to do public comment and then we can go back to the board if we could.
We do have Mr. Gibson with public comment.
We have come, we're going to roll questions into it, to here. Okay, this is a solicited input from the SSAB on the budget. Is there a mechanism for other organizations to submit input for him to consider?
Not that I'm aware of, but I would have to check. Mr. Gibson, I hadn't been asked that question before, so I have to go back and
Well,
check. But I'll check for you.
I try, I represent the Coalition of Workers Retired Employees, and I'm trying to, do recommendations that they have through this body and gotten a little bit of resistance because it's felt out of scope, and regarding pension and things. So I think the ECA actually has on its website some former guidance from Mike White, and then the ECA, says engagement with the SSAB does not substitute engagement in local governments. In there, that they were advocating direct engagement with local governments on priorities too. So they probably provide that through mechanisms, anyway. But
I'll see what I can find out and let Shelley
Okay,
know.
well, okay.
This information.
Okay, well, I have an unusual statement. Should we go into that or what?
Yes, this public comment period.
Okay, I'm Luther Gibson. I was actually the 5th chair of the SSAB. I'm a retired DOE prime contractor employee and vice president of the Coalition of Workers Retired Employees. I want to continue to encourage our SSAB to evaluate the scope of its work plan against the opportunities that exist, not only to be briefed, but to actually study and provide input on the issues. Other citizen stakeholders, local government, environmental review boards and organizations are having to spend more time on matters under the purview of other agencies such as Tennessee Valley Authority and Nuclear Regulatory Commission. These matters include environmental impacts of new activities on the real estate after it has been transferred from DOE. There was a public hearing last week on our public meeting on the Carroll's project, the Clinch River project, I'm sorry. Regarding the federal and Department of Energy budget, as of preparation of this statement, the detailed agency justifications to Congress are not available to understand the current priorities and whether proposed funding is a reduction of actual work or an efficiency gain. The cost and schedule history and budget performance of uncompleted construction projects is also heavily documented in these justification volumes. It helps people understand what's going on in their history. And as you know, the Scientific Advisory Board Chairs meeting was held virtually recently. Based on the situation surrounding that decision, you might reconsider not specifically including funding of the SSADs as a priority in the budget recommendation. Well, like we discussed that in one of the previous years. Regarding the presentations at the chairs meeting, I don't know, I didn't participate, don't know any more than relevant presentation slides, but the waste information management system maintained by Florida International University needs work. The remaining volume of circular waste to be disposed of on the ORR decreased from 1.4 million cubic meters in 2023 to 320,000 cubic meters in 2024 from the data in this system. That program has not been updated to include EMDF as a disposal facility may be an issue, but they previously assumed all of it going to EMWMF without regard to capacity. And then regarding the PFA presentation, per fluoroalkyl, fluorinated substances, I'd like to know more about the extent of the problem in Oak Ridge and what it would take to address it. And I'm also another issue down at ground level that I'm following is I'm somewhat confused after reading the FFA party correspondence regarding transfer of self-sufficiency parcel 2 as a clean parcel under CERCLA with 2 tracks separated by the White Wing scrapyard. My reading of other environmental baseline survey reports associated with clean parcel transfers is that the decision is based on adjacent areas requiring no further investigation. When you're planning a time critical removal action, that's much different than no further investigation. So I know TDEC and EPA and DOE are working on that, and I'd like to see that come out to something more public, And I thank you for your attention as always.
Thank you. Shelley, do we have any more online comments?
We have not received any other public comments, so if we want to resume board member questions, we can.
Okay. Any other questions from the board, if you would?
Yeah, I'd like to, if I could, complete my thought process.
Sure.
In the past, when COET was an ascending organization instead of a descending organization, because you're right, they've announced they're closed. I thought they already had, but anyway. Were they kind of the only game in town, or were there still these community players that got some of the real property?
The process has always been the same. So that, yes, there were other organizations that could request the property.
Okay.
Historically, though, part of the reason was, reality was for a very long time, there wasn't a lot of property to transfer. It's only been within the last few years that we've had large parts of ETTP available, where we have finished all the work that we need to do to transfer. And as a lot more of that property has become available, I would say that a lot of these other organizations have become more aware that they are. The reality is the process to get property out of the federal government into other hands is a fairly well-established process. And once we make sure that no other federal agency wants the property, it's really, I think the priority first goes to local government or other government agencies, state or local. And then after that, it would go to a reuse organization like CROAT. And then if nobody still wants it and we really want to get rid of it, I think at that point we can actually give it to GSA and they will auction, which we've done that. So,
And you've done that here at Oak Ridge?
yep, some of the property that was, actually the property that was Happy Valley, which was right across the road from the gentleman who bought that through a GSA auction. Then the property that is at the corner where Blair Road comes into 58, which would have been the end of the airport, that section of that parcel there, that was actually released through GSA. It wasn't auction though. That was actually went from GSA to the city.
Sorry, what GSA?
General Services Administration.
Thank you.
They are the
Too many letters today.
landlords of the federal government.
So, yeah, here, so to complete my thought process, if somebody wanted to know how much land out there is available, and if someone is interested in it, who do they inquire to, or how do they get their hands on it? That's actually where my end thought process is. Because it seems like to me that we spend a whole lot of money getting it marketable, and then it starts to fragment and fray a little bit. And that's not a criticism, because my thought process may not be correct. I may not be right in that, but from what I'm hearing, that's what I'm thinking.
Part of the challenge is DOE's mission, EM mission, is to clean the property up.
Yeah, I got
With the end goal being that the property will be reindustrialized.
Yeah, right.
We do not have a lot of freedom to go out, and as a government agency, we can't go out and recruit people.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody comes to us and says, hey, we like this piece of property, we are more than happy to talk to them about it, but we cannot go out and actively.
I fully understand it. I think that's a wonderful concept. Your succinct question was, okay, if somebody wanted to know what's available out there and who do I talk to if I'd like to get my hands on it? Okay, that's perfect. Okay.
Valuable information.
Yeah.
It's right down there.
Perfect. I'm sorry to have taken up so much time.
No,
If I knew somebody in the room can answer that question. Here in the room can complete my thought process.
it is not a simple process.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been working on it for 10, 15 years. And it is still a challenge to us to try to get rid of, the government can go in and take a piece of property by condemning it like that.
Getting rid
So,
of it.
yeah, we're terrible at getting rid of it. We stumble over ourselves a lot. So, yeah, good question. Very good.
Good ones.
Christoph.
Yes, I have a question. The continuing resolution apparently had some flexibility, which I never heard about it in the previous years. Were you guys able to utilize some of that funding flexibility in the continuing resolution?
That didn't happen at our level, and we don't have 25. It's not approved yet that I know of. Are you talking about?
The continuing resolution on 24 came up with some language allowing you to have some budgetary flexibility. And I was asking, was this helpful? Were you able to move some funds around, utilizing some of the flexibility?
In 24.
The continuing resolution that you are operating, up to the point that 2025 budget was released.
The 25 budget's based on the 24 continuing resolution. Is that what you? No.
No.
I'm sorry.
Before the 25 was released,
Yes.
you were operating under continuing resolution.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're.
That continuing resolution apparently had some language providing you with some budgetary flexibility. There was some language.
It's typically things like reprogramming, right? They see a
Wow.
number, so.
So typically what happens in that situation is we plan to the lowest, either the enacted or the House and Senate marks. And we would plan to continue the work just the way that we had it, just as it was planned in 24. So you can't do any new starts in that situation. So you can't start any new work. And so we would continue the ongoing activities, and that's what we did. So we didn't, I think that you're saying, did we do any re-racking in that
Yes.
in 24 or during the continuing resolution process? And we did not. We continued on with the work that we had ongoing at this and planned at the same levels. So did that answer your
Yes.
question? Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry it took me a minute to get there.
Yeah.
Otto, you have a question?
Kind of to the same point as he was talking about. The CR limits, there's no budgetary increase, but you have private companies that are incurring, and I was a electrician, so I know that we ask for more money every year. How does that, I mean, do we ask for more money for that part of it to be backfilled into this system because they incurred the costs? I mean, you're saying that you were keeping the things same progress. You could increase it, but you were keeping it the same. But the other companies that you've hired to do it were incurring more costs because the cost of materials and the cost of labor all went up. How do they get compensated for the CR? Do we have to ask for more money for that in the budget to backfill that?
In reality, the way it works is we get less work for this. We get
Is that, I mean,
less work. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. If
we are slow, you are
We-
having to have to slow down because of that budgetary shortfall.
if you're talking about like inflation,
Well, you've got a whole bunch of things. Labor.
it does affect the amount of work that we get done. That it does affect that. And so most of the time when we get the opportunity to put a budget in, with the budget call, OMB gives us a inflation rate to assume. And in out years, we would assume that, but in a continuing resolution, you're exactly right. We get whatever we got. And if things cost more, then we get less work done with the same. I mean, I don't know how else to say it.
Well, I mean, that's, so our other point is, I mean, you're asking for more money. I mean, because we had a shortfall and we had less work being done. I mean, are we asking for money to actually increase it so that we can get back to, we're might be behind on projects because of those shortfalls. And that's not to say that contractors or anybody else was at fault for, we're at the behest of the Congress for coming up with the CR and not, going along with the new budget and everything else. So we're basically slowing down instead of keeping at a same pace that we were. Our budgets are all set out there and saying, this is what we're trying to accomplish. And you're going in front of Congress and saying, we're trying to hit these marks. All of a sudden, you're telling me I gotta put the brakes on it. We get more money to be able to build that back up to where we were supposed to be at.
we try in our plan to assume a escalation rate. So we use, when we plan, the plan that we make all of our adjustments out of, we do assume escalation rate. We assume in our estimates a certain amount of increase to materials and labor. What's happened in the last couple of years is, I think across the world, it's common. It's been in excess of that since
Fine.
COVID.
I've been.
But that's part of why you do the adjustments you do, so that you have a realistic estimate of what work you can complete, because part of what you submit in the budget is also what are you going to accomplish, right? And we try to adjust that in our process to say this costs more, but internally we say this costs more, but this is how we can compensate for that, right? We try to make any adjustments that we can to maximize the benefit we get from the work that we have. But it is a challenge. It is a challenge, especially when it's very late in the year when you get a bill. It's really hard when you don't get a full bill, and then if you get you'd think it'd be really wonderful if you get a whole lot of money, but then you're thinking, okay, I got like a couple of months to figure out where to put all this, right? So but it's far worse if you had the opposite, right? So we've been very fortunate. Congress has been very generous with us. And so, we've been able to accomplish a lot of work, and overcome a lot of that. So, no, it's a very good question.
One thing that's worth adding, Shelley pointed this out, it's very good. A lot of your past recommendations on the budget, you've actually included a part of that request or that recommendation is for Congress to account for the, inflation, to increase our budget.
I understand that we
Yeah.
plan for that stuff, but the CRs just have to come in and just throw a complete wrench in everything, because there's just no budget increase. I mean, it's a dead stop.
Yeah.
And that year is lost. You're losing a whole increase, a standardized increase that you were looking forward to getting, and you're not going to be able to ever get that back. Plus, you're losing the time and everything else that you could have been, getting accomplished or needed to accomplish, and putting that and slowing that process down.
Absolutely fact of life. You're right.
I've been on, for my boss, when I was working, you start going through shortfalls, and copper being one of them. I've seen rolls of wire just double in cost. Steel piping for electrical double in cost, and you're budgeting for, this work, and then all of a sudden the prices just double.
Yeah.
And you can't go back to, us to ask for more money, because the cost of materials and everything else. Labor is one thing you can generally kind of, figure out that it's going to be this much per year. Some of the contracts are out that far, but cost of material goods, and even like what we've been going through, shortfalls, and where the price of material goods is all over the place.
Do we have any requests for new action items? Shelley,
I don't think so.
any requests?
I have not seen any.
Okay. Next meeting is June 11th on excess facilities risk reduction activities at Full and well. You guys should have got an email about a tour. If you can, try to have those responses in by the end of the week. Any additions? All right, motion. First and second motion carries. That'll conclude the portion of the meeting. The presenters and subject experts are free to leave. Thank you.
Free to go home.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
We'll start the board business. The minutes have been distributed. Any corrections? April 9th.
Mine, under members present, I'm not listed.
You were here for that?
Yes, we're here.
Yeah, that's a good correction. I missed that. I missed that.
I was here too.
So.
You were here as well?
I'm sorry, what was?
We've got a couple members who were here for the meeting that are not on the list.
Okay.
They're not on the absent list either.
I know. So that was what was really.
That's what,
Yeah, I think you were there, you were there.
Right.
New, right?
Laurie and I got on the list.
The
because-
names that were not included.
I was not.
Okay.
Us three, us three.
Three members.
See, you
I didn't
get
get those.
Yeah.
Well, we have almost the same name, so.
Yeah.
Well, it's we have to both show up to everything. Okay,
Looking at those, do we have a quorum where we could still vote?
Let me double.
We need to-
1, 2.
And it,
I think some people are just taking a restroom break.
Question
Oh.
for you.
Let me
On
go.
the quorum, how many do you need? And can you use people who teleconference?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then once you
I thought-
like start the meeting and you have a quorum, I think,
I'm confused.
from then on. you're
No, we can vote with, even though he's not here, we have enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We'll add those names. And if, we can get a motion. Favor say aye. All right, we'll go to responses to recommendations and BDFO report.
We don't currently have any open recommendations. I did understand that there has been some questions about the recommendation process, and we're going to talk about that at the next meeting, the EM stewardship meeting. But I wanted to point out that in your package, there's a 2-page write-up that talks about the recommendation. Right, it's front and back. Sound like that's in your package. There is also a visual replication of how that works. Just a brief overview. What we usually do is when we have one of these meetings, we present a topic. On the actual work plan, it will say whether DOE requires a recommendation or whether the recommendation is at your choice. For the budget, we require a recommendation. It is the only one that we absolutely have to have a recommendation on. All the rest of them are recommendations at your choice. But we usually make that decision on doing a recommendation at the EM stewardship meeting. So we will go over the process a little more in detail at that meeting for you to talk about how we go about doing this recommendation. Like Roger said earlier, I highly recommend that you look at the past recommendations on the budget because we've kept our priorities very similar over the past so many years. It makes it a lot easier for you to look at your past recommendations and see if there's any of those recommendations that you still agree with and you want to go forward with it. If some of them you may tweak because you want to change them a little bit, or you may come up with something completely in addition that you've not thought of in the past. But that's the best way to do is at least look at the past recommendations to look at those and see which one of those you might want to go forward with it. But we'll go into more detail on that process. But while I'm on this recommendation, if you'll notice under section 3, the issue group, those are the current issue members for this issue group members. The budget one, because you're required to do a recommendation, I highly recommend everyone be in on the budget issue group because it's a great way to learn, even if you're not coming up with an idea, just watching the process go through is very helpful. And if you want to get on the issue group, all you need to do is let Sarah and Shelley know, and they will put you on it. Now, what that issue group entails is as you start working through the budget process, there'll be emails going back and forth that will only include those people on the issue group. And so that just kind of, you can see all the back and forth that's going on. And it's just a better way to help kind of educate yourself on how to do a recommendation. It also makes it easier for you on another topic that we may have that we're not asking for a recommendation. If you've had some experience going through a recommendation, it may give you more information to go, hey, I think I do have a recommendation on that because now that I understand the process. So I highly recommend everybody consider signing up for the budget issue group and just let Sarah and Shelley know. That's all I have, and we'll go into more details on the process at the EM stewardship.
Move down to committee reports.
Oh, I didn't.
Got something.
Yeah, there's an item wasn't on here, but so especially for those of you who have been here for a while, have realized when we do tours and the process of getting visitor badges for you all has not gotten easier. Just put it that way. So we have begun to explore different alternatives. And one that we have found that may work is to get all of you what are called LSSO badges. They look like our badges, except they're green. They'll have your photo on them. And they're good for a year. What they do is we won't have to go through getting this process of going to Y12 and you going online and filling out a form and then making sure they've got it. All that goes away
For 1 year.
for 1 year. So the thing about it though is, and we want you all to, think about it. You don't have to decide today, but it would require you to make time to go during a business day and go to the badge office when they're ready for you after they've processed your form, which I think we've gotten most of the forms filled out. I don't think there's a lot we need from you for
I'll
that.
just need to call for a couple of, you usually give me the last 4 digits of your social for a tour. For this paperwork, I would need the full thing. And I think it also needs the city, state where you were born, similar to how they check your birth certificate. And I think maybe 1 or 2 other personal information items that I'll have to get by phone.
But right now, I mean, the standard way of doing it is y'all would each you receive an appointment from the badge office and you would go and you get your picture made and you get your badge. What we would like to do is work out, and we might be able to do this, is work out where we have all of you come at one time and they send over several people and we just do a whole bunch, do everybody's photo and everybody gets their badge at once. And I don't know if we can do that
And
or
if we
not.
can't do it all at once, we may break you up into maybe 3 groups or
Yeah,
something. at our
like 3 or 4, and you go at a time, something like that. But it'll require a little more effort on your all's part to make time to go get the badge. So once a year. Think
And if-
about it.
And once you get the badges though, we would hold on to them.
Right.
So that when you got ready for a tour, you'd show up at the event site and then we would hand you out your badge. You'd go through the tour, we'd collect the badges up. That way we would be able to keep them and make sure nothing happened with them.
So now is this a like all or nothing? Like all of us would need to do that?
Yes.
And we couldn't do the one-off like, oh, okay, you decided to just do the one time.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, this is.
What are their hours vis-a-vis people who like work in schools and?
The badge office is open from like 7:30 to 4.
But it's only on certain days of the week.
Yeah. But
I think what it does, the staff splits between here and ORNL. So they, I think maybe Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm not sure what the ones are here. And then they're at the
If-
ORNL side office on the other days.
if all of y'all decide, I mean, if the board decides they want to do this, we will make it work.
Yeah.
We'll figure out how to make it work. So. Consideration.
I think it's very kind to make an accommodating accommodating circumstance. I would encourage the board to encourage you to make a recommendation that says, look, here's what we'd like to do.
Mhm.
And, cause this is probably in view of all of everybody and all of what we need and everything. This is probably the easiest, simplest, quickest and cheapest way of doing this. And let's pursue that.
One of the other, and Shelley and I were, Melissa and I talked about this, one of the advantages, if you have badges. So when we go to do a tour right now, we have to do the visitor badges. Those visitor badges are only good for a specific day in that Y12 for a specific time.
Yeah.
If you had site badges that we could, at the last minute, we could say like, oh, instead of Wednesday, we need to do Thursday.
Yeah.
We would be able to do that.
Okay.
I
We
mean,
also wouldn't have, like right now, we have ORNL badges and then we also go get Y12 badges. And you have to hold 2 of those.
It would just be one.
It would just be the one.
Okay.
And I wouldn't have to ask you like 2 months in advance to gather all this stuff. We just go.
Yeah.
Cause I know some people, they don't know what their work schedule is gonna be that far in advance.
Yeah.
So it would give a little more flexibility.
So you could say, in a circumstance where somebody said, gee, I can't go, but then their circumstances changed, they could join us, they could just jump.
If they haven't already, yeah.
Yep.
And it would open up the days that you can.
Open up the days you can do.
Not dependent on the tag office, the badge office. Okay. All right, sounds good.
Looks like those of us sitting here are pretty game to try it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How about the ones online? Are they game to try it?
Nobody has commented, but I mean, Mary says yes.
Student. Check, see if you've got anything in the chat.
And then I can also send out an email kind of summarizing this and just say, most of the people that were at the meeting were in favor of this, but just FYI.
Real IDs won't get us in, Roger.
We've been through that.
Was the comment that we received.
I don't think what.
Never,
Right.
never.
Let's move to committee reports. The executive committee meeting, we discussed where we're changing, the quorum is not needed for, unless there's a formal vote needed because of changes. So as the minutes were just approved, they approved as distributed, provided there are no changes like tonight, we had to, where there was changes or additions, so we did have a quorum and we voted. So normally we won't have to do that. We discussed that on a meeting. And also upcoming officer elections are coming up. There's a paper in their packet that shows, I saw it, it shows who's coming off of their existing and who can no longer serve on
The
the.
very end.
Now, the very last page, officer.
So that's in there. Anyone can put yourselves out there. We're gonna try, we'd like to do that and maybe have that by the end of June if you're interested in putting your name out there to be on an officer position. Just look at that list and it has those. And our next executive meeting is June 4th. And did you have anything on the EM? You didn't. Did you?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
They didn't have a meeting.
A meeting because of the chairs meeting.
So I've covered the officer issue. If you want to nominate someone, you can, but you have to have their permission. Okay.
And you can nominate yourself.
And you can nominate yourself. All right. See, the next stewardship meeting I did mention was the 28th of May. I think that's it. Do we have any additions? Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Cheers. Thank you.